All right, Amanda, thank you so much for doing this. I'd be interested actually to start maybe with your background, because I think there's a through line in terms of how you got to House of Wise. So maybe why don't we start with how you got started in your career and how you ended up to the point where House of Wise is about to start.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest. I'm from Central Illinois, small town, very rural, first generation college grad. When I went to college, it was like my parents had no clue. They were like, "Good luck." They couldn't relate, and they hadn't had that life experience. Yeah. And this is actually a funny story that I have never shared, but I remember going to college orientation, and there's this huge auditorium at the University of Illinois, and this teacher was talking about AP credits. Mm-hmm. And I raised my hand as this like podunk small town girl. I was like, "How do I get AP credits?" And the teacher was like, "You would already need to have had them." I was like, fuck, like everybody else has credit already? Like, how does that work? And fast forward, I busted my butt through college and ended up graduating early. And my last semester of my college year, I had gotten an internship at Ernst & Young. And so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I would take 18 hours of classes. Wednesday night, I would get on a bus from Urbana-Champaign, go up to the Sears Tower in Chicago, work 20 hours at Ernst & Young, so 10 hours Thursday, 10 hours Friday, do all my homework on Saturday, take the bus back on Sunday, do it all again.
Wow.
And so that got me, because I did that got me my full-time position at Ernst & Young, where I started doing like hedge fund and tax marketing. And then I moved up into managing their Entrepreneur of the Year program. So long story to get me to my first job, where I was analyzing companies and being really like almost like a journalist, but like spending a lot of time with the CEOs of these companies.
Yeah.
And I just was like almost intoxicated by the energy and passion by these founders. And I caught that bug, and I didn't realize I caught that bug, moved from Chicago to New York with Ernst & Young, did it for a little bit, and then realized I wanted to go to a smaller company so I could take that first step to entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
Worked for Celebrity Wedding Planner, which is like a complete 180. And the team was like 4 people. And I managed his brand across like licensing deals, reality TV show. I was like drinking through a fire hose of marketing. But that was my first managing a brand experience. Mm-hmm. And then did that for a few years. Then I branched out and finally did my own thing. And I started a tech company in the wedding space. So this is back in 2011, 2012, when the New York City tech scene was just starting to heat up, and like accelerators were like really bumping. And so I joined an accelerator. I got to go to brunches at Union Square Ventures and all this stuff. And it was just so fun. But ultimately, I made every mistake that you could possibly make during that startup because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it led me to a pitch night one night. It was at The Knot, and Carly Roney, the founder of The Knot, was on the panel. Mm-hmm. And because I was in the wedding space, I had talked to her a few times leading up to that. And so she pulled me aside afterwards and was like, "Let's grab coffee tomorrow. I want to hear how things are going." I go to coffee. Unbeknownst to her, but I knew it at the time, I was like 7 weeks pregnant with my second.
Oh, wow.
And I remember her being like, "How are things going?" And I like broke down crying because I was in like a hormonal basket case. Yeah. And she was like, "Listen, when you're ready, we want you to come do what you're doing, but under the knot, because we believe the problem you were trying to solve for, etc." So
what was the problem?
So there was a company called Bridal Brokerage, and it was like an MBA project, but basically they were brokering canceled weddings, meaning lots of weddings get canceled for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And you've already paid all these deposits. So how can you broker that get the money back to the people, and then those vendors don't have that like last minute availability scramble.
Yeah.
So I flipped it and said, let's focus on availability, because every vendor is trying to book up all their available dates. So how do you create an algorithm that helps them to price through their unsold inventory? Because there's obviously a price point matching there. Yeah. And so went to the Knot, ended up doing some product stuff, and then was the first like consumer marketer. Built that team up to over 30 people. We merged with our biggest competitor, got bought out by a private equity company. So I got to be a part of a public company, then a private company, and did that for a few years. And so fast forward to Y House of Wise. So I was leading marketing there. Kind of, I viewed it as like the height of my career. Like I was where I wanted to be, a global brand, awesome team.
Yeah.
And I was going through a divorce, and I had 3 kids under the age of 4 while all this was like happening. And for the first time in my life, I was like taking an assessment of like how my body was reacting to all this stress.
Yeah.
And I realized that alcohol was really affecting me. If I drank the mommy 2 glasses of wine at night, my anxiety attacks the next day, it was a 1-to-1 ratio. They would go up, and I couldn't control it. And so I turned to cannabis for the first time in my entire life. Like I had never touched cannabis because I was an athlete my whole life. And so I didn't want to like all of that.
Sure.
And so I turned to cannabis despite being like, gosh, I'm a mom of like toddlers, and I'm an executive at a global company, but I need help.
Yeah.
And it helped me immensely. I was taking CBD during the day, microdosing THC at night. And I realized that the industry was not talking to someone like me. 80% of consumers of even now, like medical cannabis and legal cannabis, were cannabis users before.
Yeah.
And it's not, there aren't enough brands speaking to someone who's, I'm not trying to be high. I just want the functional benefits of a cannabinoid. So anyway, like I'm a huge nerd, and I went deep and started to understand like FDA doesn't do a lot of cannabis research and hemp research. And so I started to find research papers from all over the world of what hemp does. Started to interview growers, and I branding is my thing. So I was like, I know I will figure out the branding side, but I want to make sure this is a product I want to get behind. And once I understood the benefits of cannabis and like what we have inside of us, I was like, I need to start this. And then COVID, I'm like seeing my friends drink more alcohol than I've ever seen them drink. So that led me to quit my corporate job and start the company.
Wow. I want to get into House of Wise itself. But before we do that, you mentioned going through a divorce and with small kids, and you're an executive, and in many cases that's just a really, on the one hand, it's such a gift to be in that position. On the other hand, it makes it really hard. I've seen a lot of my students at Kellogg and things like that jump to jump off of that and to make that leap is incredibly hard anyway. And then when you add some of these other kind of structures, or I don't want to use the word encumbrances because it's a very negative framing on it, but you had a lot of stuff going on. So like, how did you get up the courage, or how did you organize your life maybe prior, like maybe, even like financially, like how did you get yourself in a position where you were able to make a jump like that?
Yeah. So let's talk about the emotional and then the actual practical. So the emotional side, there comes a point where I view it as like a scale of your cognitive thoughts, like, and at some point there's a tipping point in that scale where you can't stop thinking about this problem. And all of a sudden you are ideating and you are picturing how it's going to work. And when that is consuming and taking over your like day job thoughts,
Yeah.
It's a view it as a mental snowball where at first you're just going to give voice to these thoughts and you're going to maybe have a conversation.
Yeah.
And then that conversation, say I DM you on Twitter and say, Sean, I really want to talk to you about this idea that I can't stop thinking about.
Yeah.
You will ask me questions. You will give it different like lens. You will poke holes in it. And then you might say, you should really talk to this person.
Yeah.
Then you have a second conversation. And then that snowball, which was just an idea, becomes bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden it's becoming more like concrete, right?
Yeah.
Then from like a practical side, I am a very untraditional VC backed founder. And what I mean by that is I kept my day job at the Knot, told my boss that I wanted to start this like D2C company. I said I will do it nights and weekends, but I'm going to talk about it because I need to tell people I'm doing it so that it can go somewhere.
Sure.
So I was very clear on, I said, if I stop hitting my goals and all of a sudden I'm underperforming, then let's talk, but I promise I won't do that. And I raised a pre-seed round of $450K to do the R&D, get the products to a good place while keeping my day job. Now, most VCs that I talked to were like, you're hilarious. We would never do that. But I told them, I was like, I see this so clearly. Here's the vision. Here's the market size. Here's exactly the plan I'm going to follow through.
Yeah.
Take a chance on me, and then I will get you to that milestone. And that next milestone was we launched December 1st. Again, I still had a job. By that point, I had transitioned to a half-time CMO for another startup. So now I had 2.5 days for House of Wise, 2.5 days for Teal, which was another startup. And so did that, launched. I was still the CMO, part-time CMO.
Yeah.
In January, went out and raised a $2 million seed round, which took a few months because it takes a while when you're a woman to raise capital. It takes a few months. And I told all my investors, I said, when the money hits the bank, that's when I will be 100% House of Wise because now I can pay myself.
Yeah.
And so that was the practicality of it. Will that work for everyone? No.
Sure.
Because you have to find investors who understand that if we're going to give underrepresented founders a chance, they're not going to look like a traditional founder.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem like too, you'd built up the political capital, at least at the Knot, to be able to pull out. I hear often folks, they want the right to take a different path, but they haven't necessarily earned the right yet in terms of it's a risk. But for you were a known quantity, at least at the Knot. And then I would imagine we're going to get into kind of the whole building in public thing too. Like you've had a public presence for a while. So I'd imagine even for Teal, they come in and I'm going to still execute for you at a high level, which I have to think helped a lot. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay. So we got you started at House of Wise. Now you're full-time. I guess we haven't said what House of Wise, we know the space it's in. What is House of Wise?
Yeah, so House of Wise is empowering women to take control of their sleep, sex, stress, and strength. We just launched our 4th vertical. And it is at the intersection of community, content, and commerce. And so from the ground up, we're community-based, we're content-based. Like our 4th hire was the former editor-in-chief of Pop Sugar. So bringing in someone who really can build that trusted expertise in the space. Yeah. And we're trying to remove the shame and guilt that women face every single day, myself included, on needing help in all aspects of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, there's so many things, there's so many places we can go here. Okay, to start, so all 4 products is the common thread that they're all cannabis related, and then there's additional kind of active type of ingredients that kind of, okay, got it. How did you arrive at, you figure out that cannabis is helping you for anxiety. How do you then go from that? Walk me through like the R&D process. How do you go from that to these are the, it helps with these other things, and making the decision to do a gummy versus some other type of thing? Like what were some of the decisions along the way as you were trying to formulate what the product was ultimately going to become?
Yeah. So I wanted to start with the foundational things that I feel like are all interconnected. I started with sleep.
Yeah.
Because that has been a core thing for my entire life and why I function in the way that I do. Like even in college, I prioritized sleep. And I would study in the morning, and when everybody else was like going out and sleeping in, like sleep has been such a big thing because I understand as an athlete, like that's when my muscles would repair, is when I'm in deep sleep, and what is REM cycles and versus what happens. And again, when you're drinking, like what happens when you drink? Oh, you fall asleep faster, but like when you use the apps and you use kind of the biohacking stuff, you realize that you're not getting deep sleep, REM sleep. So sleep was number one. And then I was like, what if somebody didn't use the sleep? Why are people struggling to fall asleep? And then I started to understand cortisol levels.
Okay.
And when you have high cortisol levels because of stress, that blocks your natural melatonin production. Because we should naturally produce melatonin, which like at night helps us to fall asleep.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so we need something to bring down cortisol levels. So that led me to the stress line, which is L-theanine plus CBD. And then the last one is like something I faced as like a new mom. And then I had entered like the dating scene again. Yeah. And there's so much in society, there's so much narrative around she's just not in the mood.
Yeah.
I hate that because that puts the blame and the ownership on, in a heteronormative sense, the woman.
Yeah.
And what actually happens is, again, cortisol plays a part, stress plays a part, but then like your hormones change. Every month you go through hormonal changes.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to create something that, again, makes her feel less shame and guilt. And also with our content, we talk about what are the benefits of having a sexual health routine. Let's actually educate you on the fact that if you treated it like a workout, because when you have an orgasm, you release serotonin and oxytocin, like all those things happen, which help you feel better. And so we're viewing it as like health and wellness as a whole.
Yeah.
So those were the first three: sleep, exercise.
Yeah. And from the beginning, you mentioned, I know you said that you were not ever worried about the brand part of it. Like that you were going to nail that. And it seems like you did. It's a very different, first of all, implicit in that is an understanding of who your customer is. And you mentioned that the CBD industry was not, or cannabis industry was not creating products that spoke to people like you. You seem like you have a very strong view of who your customer is. You understand their psychographics. And I don't know, how much of that was just you're building a product kind of for yourself and you assume that there are other people out there like you, which is a common thing that folks will say when they're trying to come up with an idea, versus what were some of the things maybe that you did to learn the nuances of your customer and how they think?
Listen, I have a marketing background and I wish I could say that I did all this research, but it was like, I had managed a brand for a millennial women's audience for years. That's not talks to millennial women.
Yeah. And
then I had been building and speaking to millennial women on Twitter, on Instagram. And I had this like market research at my fingertips every single moment, because if I tweeted out like at the start of the pandemic, who's sleeping? What are your top 3 like issues right now?
Yeah.
And then the Knot, we were already doing research on, are people having sex right now during COVID?
Yeah.
And so when I think about when you're a founder, there's two types of founders. There's like, I'm a founder and I've always wanted to be a founder, and I go and I build and I exit, and then I take a sabbatical, and then I go and I build and I exit. That's one pedigree of founder.
Yep.
It's this other pedigree that I believe I am in, where I want to build something to change, impact a thing, a problem that affected me and the people near and close to me that I saw pattern recognition in.
Yeah.
And that is what happened. I just know this. If you look at the stats, moms as a category are drinking at a macro level. Mm-hmm. Alcohol consumption is going down. Mm-hmm. In this cohort, it's going up.
Interesting.
And so you can see that there is a need. And then when you look at the actual like space of cannabis, one, mm-hmm. hemp is not federally regulated. So there are a lot of shitty products on the market.
Yeah.
And I experienced them. There were like somewhere the THC is not like fully controlled, and I would have to go to like a board meeting with bloodshot eyes, and I'm like, this is not okay.
Yeah.
This needs to be, there needs to be products that women can trust. And so
yeah,
that was the market research. It wasn't some hard,
yeah.
I didn't go into the library and start looking at consensus data.
Yeah. In the early days, brand seems like it's been a pillar from the very beginning. You made a bunch of investments in the packaging is very high quality. It's not green with a leaf or rainbow. It's it's very elevated. You made investments in swag. Like it seems like you've been very deliberate about every single kind of interaction or touch point that a customer would have with it. I'd be curious how you went through that process and how maybe you thought, especially in the early days where you're resource constrained and it can sometimes be difficult to make the kinds of investments that one wants to make, how you think about how you thought about the trade-offs and like early thinking about brands and where should one invest versus later. I'd just be curious to hear how you thought about that process.
Yeah. So I'll go through like very in the weeds. I did a brand pyramid as the first exercise of the branding. Like, what is it going to feel like? What are the emotional benefits? And then what's at the top of the brand pyramid? What's like its essence?
Yeah.
Then I'm sure I could find it somewhere, like a 30 slide deck of like inspirational pictures. Then I actually mocked up what I want the logo to look like. And then I said, what are the foundational elements I need? Okay. One, I needed like a couple of slides so it looked good for pitching.
Yeah.
I needed the logo. I needed the mark.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to have a set of ads that I could look at and have as like a guiding light. Mm-hmm. I got it to a place where I was basically on like the 10-yard line before I ever brought in a designer.
Got it.
Found a designer who was a former Pentagram designer, because I was like, I need somebody that's worked on Rent the Runway, Away. Like I knew exactly, I wanted to create a luxury millennial women's brand. So I needed a designer who had touched millennial luxury women's brands.
Yep.
Found this woman, Natalia. She's incredible, former Pentagram designer. And we had one call. We did 2 rounds of iterations. And then I had my brand guidelines.
Wow.
And it was because I had gotten it to a place where it was so crystal clear what I wanted. Mm-hmm. She just nailed it the first time. She was the one who came up with the like visual identity of the lines, mm-hmm. where each pillar has a different set of lines. I knew the colors I wanted. She helped me finesse the actual Pantone, but that was the start.
Yeah.
Then you start writing copy so that you understand the voice and tone. So I remember I wrote the whole first page, hero and down, of how I would say it.
Yeah.
Sat down with a web designer, said, here's the brand guidelines and some assets. Mm-hmm. Here's the copy. pull a Shopify site together using an existing template.
Yeah.
Did that. So you just inch your way to it, but you have to start with some comps of what does it look and feel like and sound like. Then you're not spending money. And if you're not a brand marketer, if you're like a dev, spend time with marketers and form an opinion of what you want your brand to be like, so that you're not spinning. And the last thing I would say about branding is that it is a growing thing. What you start with, it's never going to be pixel perfect.
Sure.
The voice and tone is going to change. You're going to learn who your audience is based on who starts buying your product and speaks to them maybe a little differently. And so if you were to talk to some of our copywriters, like they would be like, at the beginning, it was mostly Amanda's voice. Like it was how I talk. Yeah. Now it's elevated, and now it's a little bit more empowering and a little bit more like the way we do humor and wit is slightly different. It's less like corny, because like my mom jokes are a whole other level, but it grows, it changes, and you have to know that. Don't wait until it's like what you think is perfect to ship it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like I've had this, I've never seen a study done on this, and I think it'd be really interesting, but I've had this theory that having a high quality brand is an early force multiplier for a startup in terms of how it's perceived from customers, in terms of when you're going out and you're pitching to investors, how they perceive it, in terms of its ability to attract press, and that it's probably one of the key things that someone should invest in early on. And it doesn't always, you mentioned like a lot of founders kind of maybe come from more of an engineering or a product background. They don't necessarily think that way. Has that mapped to your experience with this? And if so, I know you're obviously in DTC, and that tends to be more the case just from a skill set perspective or whatever it is. But do you think that's broadly applicable too, or is that mostly a DTC thing?
Think about crypto. Look at NFTs. Like there's tons of projects. Look at 2017 ICO boom. Like tons of projects. Can you create a community that is aligned with what the brand stands for and brings to the table? Yeah. And there's a reason why Bored Apes are like killing it over. Functionally, it's the same thing over and over again. Rinse, repeat. It's like a cool JPEG. Like the brand is what matters and what draws people. Yeah. And so, look, I'm a marketer, so I will say this, but we are starting to see the tide shifting from D2C CAC. What's your CAC to LTV ratio? How can you buy ads? Like, we're shifting away from that. And for me, we've spent less than any D2C on paid ads. Like we just turned on paid advertising a month ago, and we are a year old. We've grown organically until a month ago. Yeah. Because I believe if you can figure out organic growth, then turning on paid is like the icing on the cupcake. But so many, the D2C world, like we see it with Casper, like we see the numbers, like what they were acquired for and how much they raised is indicative of the tide needs to turn. And I believe it is to putting brand storytelling, organic community, all of those things at the forefront.
For companies that are wanting to do, there's the idea of every company is becoming a media company. Obviously, this your experience at the Knot, I would imagine, informed some of this. Yeah, that need to have an organic channel that is not so brittle and is not. Facebook changes its algorithm or whatever, and you're in trouble, and now you're upside down. What are common, I guess, maybe what are some of the decisions that you made in terms of investment in organic channels? Like what worked, what didn't work? Like what lessons maybe would you have for other entrepreneurs that are early stage, that have maybe more time than money, and that want to build an organic channel to reach their customers or channels, but don't necessarily know where to start. What would your advice be on how to do that and what they need to be thinking about?
So one common mistake that I see with startup founders, as I like mentor people, etc., is when you throw 30 things at the wall at once, you have no clue. You have no clue where to look at what's sticking. And so tactically, get OKRs figured out in the forefront, have a clear objective and a key result of a quantifiable key result of what you're trying to measure, even from the early days. And then you take that key result and you say, what are 3 levers I am going to try to see if I can hit that key result? And you follow through on them. Because in the startup days, I see so many founders jump shiny object, shiny object. And then 6 months down the road, they're like, we have no clue where to invest dollars. We have no clue what was a positive ROI. And then you slowly are like, okay, I'm just gravitating towards paid ads because that's the only thing that I have quantifiable results on.
Yeah.
So for me, it's focus and finish. It's if you truly believe partnerships, which I have a whole thought on partnerships, but if you believe partnerships are the way you're going to grow, let's say brand awareness. What does brand awareness mean to you? Is that PR impressions? Is that earned social impressions? Like, how do you quantify that your brand is growing? And you believe partnerships is the way to do that. Okay. For this quarter, follow through on 2 partnerships and then see if you hit the thing that you designated, social impressions. Okay. Earn social impressions. Did partnering with that brand get you to 1 million earned social impressions? And then you look back and say, no, that was not the tactic that got us to earn social impressions. Okay, next lever, influencers. Is the ROI positive? Is it leading to... So like you have to be focused and see something through, because I just see people literally be a marketing pinball machine. Yeah.
Was there anything like if you were... Obviously, it depends on the nature of the product, what it is that you're trying to build. Are there any common themes in terms of things that you said you have a whole thing about partnerships? It sounds not positive, but I'd be curious to hear that. But are there common approaches that you think would work that have relatively broad applicability at a strategic level, not necessarily at a tactical level? Or does it really just depend on the product?
It depends on your superpower, because PR, I think, is a huge lever when done well. So we have this funny phrase, like you're going to make fun of me, but so we say everything should be an octopus and not a swordfish, because so let me like explain. I wish I could say do PR or do this. But the way we think about it is, because that would be a swordfish if you were thinking about it from one lever, one channel. So let's take PR, for example, and make it an octopus. Okay. You get the like holy grail of, I tried your product for a week and here's what happened. Okay, great. You now have earned media. Are you on Rakuten so that they are getting affiliate commission and now it's affiliate revenue? So now you're hitting brand and sales. Then you get the licensing of that content piece and you run paid ads behind it. Now, I'm a cannabis company, so I can't do any of that because there's so many barriers to cannabis marketing, but I'm just speaking from like a D2C product perspective. Now you've taken a swordfish and made it an octopus. Then you become friends with that editor and you ask for them to amplify it on social. And you maybe do an in-person editorial event and you bring editors together and now you have social impressions. Like you figure out how to grow the tentacles of the octopus.
That's interesting. I like that. I would imagine that a lot of your investors either seed, I don't know if you've done the A yet or not, but
not yet.
Okay. I would imagine that many of them had a DTC background and had a DTC playbook. And it sounds as though at least to some degree, you were violating maybe some of their mental models. And
All of them.
Yeah. So how do you communicate that this is going to work? I just trust me or whatever. Like, what were those conversations like, and how did you convince them that your approach here makes sense and you shouldn't do what everybody else is doing?
So it's hard because VCs are pattern people.
Yeah.
And I, on so many levels, don't look like the patterns they're familiar with.
Yeah.
Like literally on how I'm building the company from a work culture standpoint to that we are not a paid ad D2C company and that we're cannabis. So I will say that fundraising is super hard.
Yeah.
Not because we're not growing organically. Like we just had 40% month over month growth. We're under a year. We will be profitable in Q1. We're not even a year old. We have all the like bullet points of what you would think VCs want to invest in. But because of all the things I first mentioned, they don't know, they can't size the market because hemp is not federally legal. It's a brand new category. Sexual health and wellness just became a VC-backed category like 2 to 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So literally, I can show you hundreds of emails being like, we love what you're doing, love the brand, think you're the right person for this, but we cannot size this market. So thus we are out.
Yeah.
So I have to find investors that are untraditional and or understand the power of community and content, which is what led me to the founders of Pop Sugar leading my round. Brian Sugar built a media company. He understands the power of owning an audience's attention and why that is, I want to say, better than like just paid ads. It has not been easy. Fundraising is a nightmare for me because of all these things that I come against, but it makes it more exciting because it's like the people that do get on board, they know that if we succeed, we've built a moat like crazy.
Sure. Yeah. For entrepreneurs that would be listening to something like this, I just in conversations I've had in the past, when you talk about the idea of thinking of yourself like a media business in addition to being a product, their brains seize up a little bit and they get clammy. And I think part of it is just, it sounds like a tremendous amount of work. So like, how do you advise folks that want to try to go kind of down your path, invest in an organic, think of themselves like a media business and not just like a product? What advice would you give them?
You cannot compare yourself to D2C companies because the growth trajectory, it's slower in the beginning. It's going to be like, I could just spend $30K this month on paid ads, but you don't own that audience is not yours. They're like, they just came through, you showed them the right ad at the right time and you had the right conversion. Those are great things to have. Those are metrics and like practical things you should have. But you then are spending just as much effort on retention marketing. And so it's just choose your hard. And for me, I'd rather own the audience, not own, that sounds like super predatory. I'd rather have a genuine connection with the person and provide value to them before they click checkout, than try to earn their attention or earn their trust or earn their emotions after the fact.
That makes a lot of sense. Along the same lines, it seems like and correct me if I'm wrong here, I can't, and I haven't been able to figure it out. There's either, I don't know if you have an affiliate kind of piece to this or like a multi-level marketing type of piece to this, or if it's just literally you just have a community of people that love you. And it's probably a little bit of both, but like you have thousands of women out there now that are talking about your brand and sharing the stuff that you share and all that kind of stuff. How did you approach the community building piece? Because it seems very deliberate, and maybe what lessons have you learned kind of going through that process?
Yeah. So you probably have a lot of listeners in the Midwest, right? So I grew up in the Midwest where MLMs are a thing. You can't like scroll my Facebook feed without somebody trying to sell you like Rodin and Fields or whatever.
Yep.
And so I grew up understanding MLM mechanics, right? Mm-hmm. So what are the reasons women go towards an MLM? One, it's like all these MLMs are out there saying you're going to make so much money.
Sure.
So maybe it's money. Most likely it's money, mission, and community. Mm-hmm. So as someone who is trying to empower women, I took the lens of what makes this predatory? Like, let's look at the quant behind MLMs. Less than 1% of women make money.
Yeah.
Because there's two functions of an MLM. You have to buy the product up front.
Right.
So you have all this product in your house or waiting to be drop shipped, whatever it is, but you have to buy. There's monthly minimums that you have to hit. Yeah. And two, you have to recruit people, which is just gross. Join my team. If I had to hear join my team one more time. So I'm like, let's peel this back. Yeah. Why? Like, women are influential. Yeah. If I go to dinner with a group of women, at some point, someone will ask me about what's my new like skincare, whatever, or like, where did I get those shoes, or you name it. Yeah. Someone will usually buy something in that dinner. Yeah. We are influential beings, and we trust the people in our inner circles. Yeah. So when you're talking about something as extreme and unfamiliar as cannabis, who are you going to trust? You're going to trust the mom, friend, or the woman in your life who's, holy crap, I'm getting the best night's sleep ever. I'm taking this gummy and it's helping immensely, versus a paid ad that's, we promise you'll sleep great. No. Yeah. Yeah. So to answer your first question, we are not an MLM. Yeah. We are affiliate marketing, which is around and it's literally used in every single company out there. Yep. But we pair affiliate marketing with really intentional community. Yep. And so every one of our affiliate marketers, so we call them wise women. Yep. They get access to a Slack channel where they get to ask questions, whether it's about marketing, how to build a company, their sex life. Our experts, like we have an in-house counsel of a sex expert, a sleep expert, a wealth expert. Like, those people are in the Slack channel, can answer questions for them. And everything that I was saying on Twitter, I would get tons of DMs being like, I want to talk about this, but I don't want to do it in the public sphere. And I'm like, great, let's take the conversation I've been having on Twitter, move it into Slack so that we can form communities around all the aspects of what it's like to be a woman. Because like my past was like, and what in VC backed companies is, there's mom groups that get, okay, this is the group you talk to about being a mom, but that's it. Yeah. Then this is the group you talk to about being a CEO or a professional woman. Yeah. And then you have maybe some friends you talk about your sex life with. But what happens if we merge all those things? Because that's what the reality is. Yeah. You're a multifaceted person. Yeah. Related to that, you were probably my favorite example of somebody, when you talk about like that idea of building in public that we were talking about earlier, there's an authenticity to what you're doing from a personal branding perspective. And I know you had been building a personal brand, or whether it was deliberate or not, you had one prior to starting House of Wise. So you were able to leverage that, but it's something that most entrepreneurs I talk to are afraid to do. They're afraid to put themselves out there. They're afraid to, in a lot of cases, they're afraid to tweet or do anything, period. But then especially to marry their professional
life or the corporate aspect of their life with even some of the personal aspects of their lives that just is terrifying to them. And it seems like that's something that I would imagine, just based on how deliberate everything else has been, that there was some deliberateness to that. And it seems like it's been working quite well. What would was that a deliberate decision? What maybe have you learned through doing that? And maybe what would your advice be to others who think that would be beneficial to them, but they're not sure or they're afraid to do it?
I wish I could say it was deliberate. My journey on Twitter, I just got on Twitter now. It's probably been 2.5 years ago. Okay. I just started actively tweeting. It wasn't for the intention of I'm going to tweet. I was in a conversation with a guy I was dating at the time, and he was big on Twitter. He loved Twitter. He was like, all my friends are from Twitter. And I was like, it's a male echo chamber. I don't know why you spend time on that. And he's like, Amanda, if you put the things that you say to me out there, you will literally open up doors that you don't even understand could be open for you. Yep. And so I love to be proven wrong. And so I was like, listen, I will go on Twitter for 6 months. I will tweet 5 times a day. I will make it a priority, and I'll see what happens. I want to see what you're talking about, because he was literally raising capital and doing all this stuff from Twitter. Yeah. So that's why I got on. It wasn't I want to build a personal brand. It was I want to be proven that Twitter's not just. And then it did start to do those things. All of a sudden, investors were responding to my emails. People, every single person that works for House of Wise, I found on Twitter. Yeah. So sales comes from Twitter. It's insane. And so that's the personal brand piece. Now, should everyone have a personal brand or talk like I do? If we were to go to dinner, Sean, you would know more about my life than you probably ever would want to know, because that is just who I am. I am a very unfiltered, wear my heart on my sleeve. I say what I'm feeling all the time. So literally, I don't put any thought into any of my tweets. That's why there's tons of typos. I literally am tweeting what's happening in my brain, for better or for worse. Sure. Now, I've had people come to me, social media managers, being like, we want to coach our CEO on how to talk in public. And I'm like, if it's not how they talk every single day, it will be inauthentic, it won't land, and it will look performative. Yeah. So not every founder should reveal their whole personal life, because if it's not what they want to do, that will come through. Yeah. The building in public piece, though, where you are bringing people along the journey of what it's like to build the company, because you are going to learn so much during that first year that lots of people want to hear about. And so there's ways, I always say, I never subtweet anyone. I never try to put anything out there that's negative, but everything that happens that's negative, you can make a positive. So you have a bad interaction with an employee, or you have to fire someone. Turn it into 5 things you should look for when hiring a blank, because you learned the hard way. Yeah. And all of a sudden you have a valuable tweet that's twisted into the positive from a lesson you learned, and go forward. You have content coming out your ears when you're a founder. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I would be, and if it's not interesting or whatever, that's fine. But I would be super curious on how you are juggling everything, just at a personal level. You know what I mean? How do you grow a business like this? It seems like you've got a very competent team, just in some of the interactions I've had with them, which helped a ton, I'm sure. But like you said, you got 3 young kids. I know you moved a couple of times in the last year while trying to do all of it. How are there any, other than just I'm doing my best and I'm getting good sleep, are there any other sort of practices or disciplines or routines or ways in which you structure your day or week that have been helpful in that regard? I'm a really fun robot, if that makes sense. when I'm fundraising, all hell breaks loose and your calendar is no longer your own.
Right.
Like you're at the home of when people can meet with you. But
Yeah.
normally I am super intentional about my day. So before I get to my desk in the morning, I already have somewhere written 3 things that I want to move forward that day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't take meetings before 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
because everything is around like optimizing your day around your like best self, right?
Yep.
So my cortisol levels are twice as high in the mornings. I'm a morning person is what like you would say.
Mm-hmm.
But from a physical perspective, it's because my cortisol levels are so high.
Yeah.
And so I can get 8 hours of work done in 3 hours if I block my notifications, if I sit down during that time and only focus on those 3 things. I get them done.
Yeah.
Then I move in. So I call that offense. Like I'm on offense in the morning. And that usually starts around 8:30 after I've gotten the kids to school, etc.
Yeah.
I try to get up around 5 so that way I can have like my quiet time of reading whatever or just being mindful. I wish I could say I meditate, but I don't. My brain doesn't do that. Then I go into defense. So 12 to 3:34 is defense, meaning everybody else needs me.
Yeah.
What meetings do I need to be in? What Slacks do I need to respond to?
Mm-hmm.
It's moving other people's stuff forward.
Mm-hmm.
By 4, my cortisol crashes. Like flat out, I am not a functioning human by 4 p.m.
Yeah.
So I go to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
4 to 5 is like my get back into functioning as a human mode.
Mm-hmm.
Then I have to go get my kids. I'm in mom mode. And then I go to sleep. And literally, I get my kids to bed. I go to bed at 9 p.m. Every single night. Take my gummy. I get my 8 hours, 9 hours of sleep. And then I do it again. Because I can't do everything in a day. Yeah. But if I get the big things I wanted to done in the morning, I call it a win.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's not like rocket science. Like I think people are looking for me to say some groundbreaking thing. Yeah. But it's like I get good sleep, which allows me to think clearly. So I get my 8 hours of work done in 3 hours and I get a workout in and I spend time with my kids when I have them so that I don't feel guilt. I don't allow guilt to happen. Whatever's in front of me is the thing I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. It's funny. I was chatting with the founder of Rescue Time recently, and he not only like that whole 3 hour thing, like that is the rule. And his whole thing is like, I'm trying to convince people like you cannot move at that pace for 8 hours. You just can't. And so figure out when your 3 hours is or whatever it is and optimize for that. That's cool.
People literally are like, Amanda, you only work 3 hours a day. And I was like, that's all I need to work. Have you seen how much I get done in that 3 hours? It is like a time warp.
Yeah.
But then also I will say, surround yourself with people. Like I know what my superpowers are and where my gaps are. Mm-hmm. I am a starter, not a finisher. Yeah. I'm great at the 0 to 1.5.
Sure.
But once we start getting into weeds, my ADD, literally, I'm like, someone else has to do that thing. Yeah. And I have surrounded myself with, we do a ton of these assessments. I surround myself with finishers. Yeah. Like people who are not the 0 to 1, but they love the like checklist. I'm going to do this. They cross every T, dot every I. Great.
Yeah. That makes sense. Listen, I want to be respectful of your time. We're in your focus block. For folks that want to learn more about House of Wise, where should we send them?
houseofwise.co. You can learn about the products. You can read all of our amazing content from all of our editors, or you can follow me on Twitter if you want to hear about business stuff. If you want to see the behind the scenes of my like crazy mom life, that's Instagram.
Very cool. This has been super fun. It's been really in my class in particular, lots of MBA students trying to build DTC stuff and trying to get things off the ground. And you were one of the few that I keep pointing them to about seeing how one does this and how one goes from 0 to 1 and the good and the bad. Because like you said, you're sharing the challenges too. congrats on everything so far, and looking forward to seeing where House of Wise goes in the coming years.